Here are 5 takeaways from the Houston Texans 2025 NFL Draft. Let's break down into what they might not have told us verbally, but what we can break down subliminally from their selections in the NFL Draft. You saw the thumbnail. It's going to start on a little bit of a somber note, but Tank Dell is probably done with the Houston Texans. I don't like putting that out there, and it's not 100% certain, but let's just talk about the history. Tank Dell has an amazing rookie season that ends with a broken leg. He comes back the next season. He's not as productive. Him and Stroud don't seem to be connecting as much. When he finally starts looking like rookie Tank Dell, he blows out his knee in the Chiefs game, the game before, or a couple games before the playoffs. Now, you can argue it's Bobby Slowick. You can argue it's offensive scheme, but that might be true. But the reality is he also was coming off an injury. Now he's going to be coming off an even more severe injury. I love watching Tank Dell play, but no one feels confident in Tank Dell this season, upcoming season, because he's probably not going to play. And I don't know how confident you can feel about him next season either, if he comes back and plays for the Texans. So what do the Texans do? They double up in wide receiver picks and weapons for CJ Stroud. They go get Jalen Knoll, the second Iowa State receiver of the draft. Let's do a quick comparison. Tank Dell selected 69th overall, runs a 4.49 40, 5'8", 165 pounds. Knoll basically beats him in every category besides when he was picked, which is why I think the Texans were so quick to grab another receiver. I think Jalen Knoll was a bigger steal than, the mainstream draft media is projecting it to be. Runs faster, and he's bigger target. So when it comes to the comparison between Knoll and Tank Dell, they're pretty close, pretty similar type of player. There are some differences. I do think Tank Dell's routes are twitchier, they're quicker. I do think Knoll has a bigger catch radius, and he's more physical. With that being said, they're both primarily slot receivers, and both of them have surprisingly good vertical threat ability being slot receivers. So I think the Texans did a great job finding a Tank Dell replacement. He can also learn a lot from Christian Kirk, who was thought initially to be that replacement, and it puts less stress on keeping Kirk, or if Kirk gets injured, because Kirk has had a bit of an injury history. So it does kind of suck that Tank Dell is going to have to work his way up to make this roster again. But on the other side of it, it is good that the Texans found a replacement. Really good draft pick in Jalen Knoll. Now, moving on, let's talk about staying with the receiver class. Are Mechie and Hutchinson going to be cut from this team? If I had to bet on it, I would bet probably 75% sure that both of them are going to get cut. I'm like 95% sure Mechie's going to get cut. Look, this is the wide receiver room from top to bottom. Nico Collins is your 1. You hope Jaden Higgins can be your 2. Christian Kirk can be your 2A, 2B, I mean. Jalen Knoll can be your 2C, arguably. Then you have Justin Watson, Braxton Berrios. Braxton Berrios can be a punt returner, has special team capabilities. Justin Watson, the Chiefs receiver, is another 6'4" big receiver. Hard for me to think they cut him. Hutchinson was a teammate of the 2 new receivers, but he hasn't really shown that much, and Mechie has just been the worst of the bunch, unfortunately. I think Mechie has had some opportunities. He's had chances to try to prove himself. He does have kind of a heartbreaking story. The reality is he's just been given so many opportunities, not that much production from John Mechie III. Xavier Hutchinson, a little more productive. I have a little more faith in him. Maybe you try to keep him around on the practice squad. The reality is I just think another team will probably pick him up with a less loaded receiver room. And that's kind of what happens when you add these 2 new receivers. We just talked about Tank Dell having to work his way up. Hutchinson and Mechie are going to have a very hard time staying on this roster. That is just the reality when you add more competition to the receiving room. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I'm begging the Texans not to keep Hutchinson just for camaraderie. If he can't make the team, you got to cut him, and you have to cut Mechie. I don't really care how close he is with Stroud and the others. Moving on to takeaway 3. Look, the Texans are telling you that the guards are basically going to sort themselves out. Take a look at what we have listed here. I have Ariante Ursere. Who knows what he's going to play? I think he can be a tackle. He might move to guard. But you've got Titus Howard at left guard. You've got Juice Scruggs at right guard. Their backups are Lincoln Tomlinson and Ed Ingram. And then the one tweak I could see happening to this is if Juice Scruggs plays center, and then maybe Jarrett Patterson is a backup center, and maybe Lincoln Tomlinson plays guard. The reality is the Texans are saying, hey, these guys are just going to sort themselves out. They chose not to draft a guard They picked up a center in free agency right after the draft, but they chose not to draft a Tate Ratledge, not to draft a Jared Wilson or whoever it may be. So they're basically saying, hey, the guards are going to sort themselves out. There is still time for them to make new additions and to add new players. I just don't really think it's going to happen. You've already added a veteran guard and a high pick guard that hasn't panned out. I think it's just going to be a bloodbath. They're just going to compete. And I think the Texans are telling us, these are our guys. We're going to figure out who the best five are and go from there. So hopefully the new scheme as well plays a part in that. We all know the reporting that came from Bobby Slowick's offensive line protection. It was reported that defenders could take advantage of it and defensive coordinators could manipulate the scheme. So really don't want any of that moving forward. The fourth thing is kind of a big one, but I'm saying that Mixon's workload is basically going to go unchanged. Joe Mixon had 243 carries, which was the 13th most in the NFL in the regular season, and he missed pretty much 3 games on an ankle injury from a hip drop tackle. Dameon Pierce, the running back 2, if you could even call him that, had only 40 carries and a lot of blowout games. And Mixon turns 29 in July. He will be 29 before the season even starts. So the Texans did kind of address this in drafting Woody Marks, the running back out of USC. The only issue I have with that is Dylan Sampson was there, who I like a lot more, but I understand if you want to make the fit argument. Woody Marks is a really good receiving back. He can be that third down back that gets a chip on the O-line and then, bananas out to try to catch a pass when you're giving Joe Mixon a rest. But the reality is, guys, Woody Marks is not going to eat into Joe Mixon's carries. Joe Mixon will continue being the workhorse. I was kind of against that with his age and just the fact that he's been in the league for so long, like 7-8 years. I wanted a complementary back, like a Dylan Sampson who could be the lightning to Joe Mixon's thunder, but you get Woody Marks. A lot of people think it was a bit of a reach. That's up for debate, but didn't have him as high on my board, and he's really only a third down back who's not going to take a significant amount of those carries. So that's number 4. And then ending with number 5, the Texans are also kind of saying, hey, D tackles are fine. Yes, we did draft Keontae Hamilton late in the draft process. I don't know if he even makes the team. This is a pretty loaded D tackle room, and this is just the D tackles. This doesn't even include the defensive ends. You've got Mario Edwards, who I guess you could, Mario Edwards would be a D tackle. You re-get Sheldon Rankins. Danico Autry is the person who could be considered, a defensive end, but they move him around, so I still included him with the D tackles. Tim Settle had a breakout year last year. He's still on 1 year left on his cheap contract, which you got to take advantage of. And you re-sign Kurt Heinisch. Don't really know why. He was injured for a long time, but they like him. Tommy Togiai was a nice surprise off the practice squad. He played really well in some big games. And then again, Keontae Hamilton, if you make the team, that's awesome. If you don't, someone will probably pick you up because this is a loaded Texans D tackle room, and it's also a loaded defensive end room. There are so many defensive ends as well that we could talk about. But those are my 5 kind of takeaways that the Texans told us from the NFL draft. Let me know if you agree with these. Are there any you would add? Thank y'all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more daily Texans content, and I will see y'all in the next one, man. Peace out.